already in the talks and tours for the day. Remember, this is the second Battle of Winchester. Second Battle of Winchester is the first full arms engagement of the Gettysburg Campaign. What do I mean by that? You got the Battle of Brandy Station, which is an all-cavalry battle, and that takes place before this. But this is the first battle of the Gettysburg Campaign that's going to involve infantry, artillery, cavalry, and this is a majorly significant action that will allow, and maybe unfortunately allow, Lee to continue his route into Pennsylvania and to move forward with his plans for invasion. Now, let's remember, Gettysburg is not the objective. We call it the Gettysburg Campaign today because we know the outcome, we know the end. Lee is not moving to Gettysburg, he's moving into Pennsylvania, and it'll result in the Battle of Gettysburg, and then it will result, as we all know, in a retreat back through this area. If the men here under Milroy's command are not cleared out of the way, if this 8,000-man garrison here under the command of Milroy is not cleared from Robert E. Lee's rear, it could pose a lot of problems for him. How can it pose problems for him? It can pose problems for him both in advance and retreat. You cannot have 8,000 enemy troops behind your lines and hope to secure your line of communication, your line of supply, and the line that you will need to ferry wounded back into a safe territory. And you can't keep the door open for your return home if you have 8,000 men behind you that aren't wearing the same uniform that you're wearing. So this threat or this situation here in Winchester has to be resolved. And as we've talked about all day, you've got 3 days of battle here. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. When you were all at Star Fort, Jack wrapped up the story of what's happening on the 14th. And if you remember, when Jack ended his talk, darkness was falling over Winchester. There had been a all-evening fight to try to save West Fort on behalf of the Federals, or to try to capture West Fort if you're on the Confederate side of the lines. And so as night falls, Milroy has a lot on his mind. It's been 2 days and he's held pretty well here. There's a significant Confederate force that has moved in on his east, has moved in on his west. One of his forts, West Fort, has fallen into enemy hands. But there's some things that we don't normally talk about when we talk about Milroy's decision to leave. Milroy on the 11th, remember we're talking about 13th, 14th, and 15th, on the 11th, knowing that Confederates were moving his direction and anticipating a move to Harper's Ferry, which is in that direction up along the Potomac River, he sent all of his rations except enough for several days in wagons and out of Winchester, which means as night is falling on the 14th, his army only has 1 day's rations left. We don't think about that when we talk about Milroy abandoning Winchester. He had 1 day of rations left. The other thing that he has to think about is his supply of ammunition. Each infantryman on the night of the 14th had approximately 100 rounds of ammunition left. Each artilleryman or each artillery piece had only about 30 rounds of ammunition left after the fighting ended for West Fort. So on top of the tactical situation, how he's being enveloped by the Confederates, the other thing that's on his mind is this issue of supply. And we often forget about supply and logistics when we're out here talking about the Civil War and when we're judging or reviewing or talking about the decisions of these commanders. Milroy will make the decision that night that he is going to leave Winchester. And where is he going to go? Where is he going to go? The only place he has any hope of reaching that's anywhere enough that he could have a hope of keeping his army intact, is Harper's Ferry. You can hear in the distance Route 81 and Route 11. Route 11 is running parallel to these high-tension power lines. Just beyond the trees is where Route 11 is. That was the Valley Turnpike at the time of this battle. You would think that he could move directly north, but he can't, because there are already Confederate troops in Martinsburg, and Federal troops have been driven out of Bunker Hill. This is between Martinsburg and where we are right now. So Milroy knows that he can't just head north on the Valley Turnpike. The only hope he has is to follow the Valley Turnpike until he gets to a point just on the other side of these fields where the old Charlestown Road cuts across from Charlestown, Virginia, now West Virginia, across in a southwesterly direction and unites with the turnpike. If he can get his columns, he has 3 brigades with him, if he can get his 3 brigades to that intersection and he can get onto the old Charlestown Road, he might have a chance at slipping the noose here, because he knows he has Confederates north of him by about 15 miles, and he knows that he has Confederates, absolutely knows that he has Confederates closing in on him on both sides of Winchester, very close quarters to his men. Any questions on the situation at the moment that night falls on the 14th?
Wait, was he like off-roading, like not on a road, he said? Like for that first initial where he left, was he just hiking through fields, or was there a road they were actually going on?
So what he's going to do, the order is going to go forward at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. They will step off. So the order is about 11 o'clock on the night of the 14th. And so between 11 and 1 or 2, the men are going to go to rendezvous points. And those rendezvous points are going to be chosen so as to make it the most advantageous for silence and discretion in relation to what the Confederates will be able to hear. You gotta remember, we've got a lot of ambient noise in our world today. We don't even recognize it. We don't even hear it. But when night would fall in the middle of the 19th century, you could hear from where we are right now, you could hear an army moving on that road if it wasn't quite. I mean, you could just hear it. You could hear the wagon, you could hear the march of the soldiers, you could hear them chattering. And so this was all done in complete silence. And they went, when they left Winchester, there is a gorge, a low area below Star Fort. And they went across country there until they hit a dirt road. When they got to that dirt road, there were staff officers there to silently give the order for them to make the turn. And they turned east towards the turnpike, and when they got on the turnpike, the Valley Turnpike, they then were on the road. And that kind of sets us up perfectly for what we're going to talk about when we get to the top of the hill. So if you guys want to come with me, we'll go up to the top of this rise, and we'll pick up the story there.